Hello again, and welcome back to the Glasgow South Model Tram and Rail Hume workshops. Today we're going to have a wee look at the art of soldering. Some folks kind of shy away from this, saying I can't solder or I can't get it to work. It's a thing that takes practice, but it's not impossible to overcome. And the main thing is you've got to have whatever you're going to solder, both sides of the joint have to be clean, and that's where flux comes in. And some people rely on the flux that's in the solder, and that can be a downfall. I always solder, when I go to solder a joint, whether it's a wire or a rail or whatever it is, I always use separate flux to clean the joint, so that when you put the soldering iron and the solder together, it flows with no problem. The other thing is that a lot of folk don't realise that there's unleaded solder and there's leaded solder. Unleaded solder was brought in because of the scares of the lead poisoning, but it's not good stuff to work with. It doesn't give you a good joint. We found this in our club, and by the way, I'm putting this over from our own experience. Others are going to disagree with this, but we found it very, very difficult to work with. We were at a show in Glasgow with our layout, and we couldn't figure out why the thing wouldn't run. And when we opened the panel, we didn't even touch anything, but there was wires jumping off everywhere for no reason. And it was one of the guys from one of the other layouts says, "You've been using unleaded solder." So that told us a clue, so we had to go and resolder every joint with leaded solder, and the layout did run eventually at the show. So these are two wee points that puts you in the right direction, and we're going to have a wee look at what the tools that you need to solder. So once I've got the camera set up, we'll have a wee look at that. So here we are again, friends. And so what are the basic tools for soldering? Well, the most obvious one is the soldering iron. And I've got this Antex soldering iron, 18 watts, not too hot. Does what I want it to do for soldering wires to rails and any other really light soldering jobs. Now you can get these in various different wattages, but 18 watt does that on me. One of the things that you should always do when you're finished with it is, once it's cooled down, and I do say that, once it's cooled down, pull the bit off, because if you don't, eventually you'll not get it off. That's why you always do it when you're finished with it. And if you try and do it with a pair of pliers, if it's not been taken off for a while, you'll knacker the element, being quite honest about it. So it's just a question of once it's cooled down, just turn it and pull it off, and any deposits underneath the element. And remember, don't switch it on without a bit on, because again, you'll knacker the element, because the element actually, I think, acts as a heat sink to stop the element overheating. So that's that. I've got another one that I've got here for a bit heavier jobs, and it's the Weller soldering gun, and this is the 9200 UD iron. I got this when I used to be involved with TV repairs, because some of the some of the televisions you had heat sinks on top of chips, and to change the chip you had to get the heat sink off, and an ordinary iron just when you look at it. So I changed to that, no problem. Secondly, it's only activate when you press the trigger. So when you're not using it, it's no on, so nobody gets burnt. But as I say, I only use that for heavier jobs. Solder is a real solder. For in the Model Railway Club we use a lot of it. As I said prior, always use leaded solder. Under no circumstances use unleaded solder, because you are going to have problems with joints later. And other guys will disagree with that, but that's what we found. We stay away from it. It's a nightmare. As well as that, how to unsolder things, which brings in this. You can use, you can get soldering wicks and stuff like that, but this is what they call a desoldering pump. And what you do is you push this knob down, and then you put it over the soldering joint. You can see this. Try and zoom in a wee bit. If you put it that way, maybe see it better. You put it over the solder joint, melt the solder, and that the nozzle is over the solder, and it flicks out and it sucks the solder away. Great tool, wouldn't be without it. Great for desoldering stuff. Saves the circuit board getting damaged in any way. I've used it with our CDUs when we had to upgrade the capacitors to take 24 volt AC input. To get the capacitors out, I had to desolder 4 of them in each board, each capacitor discharge unit. That got most of the solder away, so that when you put the soldering iron on the wire end of the capacitor, it just came through. No damage to the circuit board whatsoever. Brilliant. The other thing is you can use, as I mentioned, soldering mops, and if you remember the pot scourer, the wee coily pot scourer, you get one of them, stick it in a wee round bowl, and you can wipe the bit on that. Now, when you go to solder rails, zoom out a wee bit now, I think. This is a bit of rail, as you can see, and you've got to polish the bit you're going to solder. You've got to polish it, and I use my trusty fibre brush, the thing that I don't use for wheels and commutators. This is one job I do use it on, and you just rub it on this edge of the rail. And it brings it up nice and shiny, and you just put flux on it, and I do say that I've got a wee jar with some flux in it here. I always flux my joints, I always do that, and so when you put the solder on with the soldering iron, the flux cleans the joint to make sure there's no air pockets or nothing. Cleans up the joint, and the solder just flows. You shouldn't have any problems. That's where people make the mistake. As well as that, the soldering iron tip, that must be kept clean as well. Cleanliness is the way to do this. You can rub that on the pot scourer thing, that will clean it, or if you get a damp cloth, just wipe the end of it, that will clean it. But either way, you must keep both joints clean. Cleanliness is the secret of this. So many people have heard, oh, I can't solder for peanuts, but it's not difficult to learn. Get some scrap bits of track and use them to practice on. Practice with them. And I've also heard that somebody had a soldering iron that actually melted the plastic before it would melt the solder. Well, there's something wrong with that. I suspect, and I'm only suspecting, that it was unleaded solder they were using.